for those that you love and that you think about from day to day. So a few of those ideas and topics. Number one, I want to talk about burnout. We all have heard of it before. We all understand how significant it can be, but we want to talk a little bit about that. Also, this may be a newer term for people. I'm not sure, but I do want to talk about being aware of codependency. We'll talk about what that means. I'll share some mindfulness techniques and helping you with some tips with developing a self-care plan. It's so important to take care of yourself. Excuse me. And then I developed an acronym that I use across my practice to help people with taking care of themselves. And so we'll review that as well. So that'll be the bun of our conversation today. And so as I'm going throughout the presentation, if there is a hand, I believe that's how we're going to do it. If there is a hand or a question, please, you can stop me and ask the question. But I'll also leave some time at the end for you all to ask any questions that you may have. So let's just talk about the definition of caregiver really quickly, right? You have two types of caregivers, and it doesn't really matter which one you are. You're still investing your time, your resources, and your family to be able to take care of people. But there are two different types, right? In general. So we have people who are paid to take care of other people, and there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes we do need those resources to be able to help people that we're caring for and people that we love. Then we have those that are in informal roles, right? Those that aren't necessarily getting paid from some third party organization or institution, but they're really just doing it sincerely out of passion and love for that other human being, right? So most of these caregivers that we see are more on the informal side, right? So the statistics show, and actually these numbers, I'm sure have gone up since 2015, show that there's about 50 million people, right, that are taking care of loved ones without pay, without reimbursement. They're doing it with their own resources. They're doing it with their own money. And oftentimes they're doing it and not necessarily having everything they need to help that individual, right? So we know that task is hard. And so if you're in the informal role, right, and you necessarily don't have the financial support, I pray and hope that you all have other levels of support in your family, outside of family, helping families. We've heard the old African proverb before, and it's true, right? It takes a village to raise a child. It takes more than one person to take care of one person. And so we definitely want to make sure that we have what we need at our disposal and not taking on that task by ourselves. And as far as when we talk about caregiving, right, that can kind of take on different forms. So that can be physical care, that can be emotional care, that could be helping somebody with their healthcare needs, or it can be a combination of all of those things. It also can be, really just assisting somebody with taking care of their ADLs. Their activities of daily living, whether that's helping someone to take care of their hygiene, whether that's helping someone to budget their finances, whether that's helping somebody else to manage their resources. Whenever we put ourselves in a position to empower someone else to move from day to day, in essence, we're talking about caregiving. And whenever we do that, we're giving some sense of our own selves, right? We're investing our lives into the life of another person. And I think really that's in a broader sense what we are all responsible for doing. Obviously, that's already built into parenting. Once we have a child, we obviously have to do some of those things for them. But I think there is a broader sense that we have a responsibility to take care of each other. And so in some shape, form, or fashion, we all have become caregivers, right? But some people have taken on that responsibility more than others. And for some people, that caregiving has become lifelong. Some people, that caregiving is short term. But either way, taking care and helping another human being move on from day to day, is an awesome task, and we all have some responsibility if we're not directly doing it to support other people who may be doing it. So I want to talk about caregiver stress, right? Um, there's obviously some stress related to bringing somebody into your home that wasn't there before, or having to transport yourself to someone else's home to be of assistance. That obviously can create a sense of burden on our own lives, right? And I've seen multiple situations where people have wanted to help, whether that was bringing somebody into their home, whether that was adding another room into their home, whether that was becoming responsible for doctor's appointments, rehab visits, balancing budgets, helping to shop and buy groceries, whatever it was. I've seen people who have gotten into that caregiving role with the idea that it was going to be one way, and it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. It didn't seem like it was going to be that much of a difference between how they already were carrying out their day-to-day activities, and really took on a lot of emotional and physical strain from having to care from another human being. And some people have gotten into that situation and haven't had the proper help and assistance that they've needed. And so we can have detrimental consequences when we don't have what we need as human beings to be able to take care of another human being. And so we see all types, and some of these things I'm sure maybe some of you have experienced or known somebody who's experienced these things before. We've seen people literally lose families, right? I've seen a situation where somebody a lady took on her mother to live with the family, and her husband was okay with it at the beginning, and the mother's health began to deteriorate, so that required more of their attention and their care and their time. And the husband, he gracefully bowed out. It was too much for him. But this daughter, having this love for her mom and this responsibility to take care of her later on in her life, wanted to keep caring for her mother. And so those types of things, when we bring other people into our world, I'm going to talk about the 3 types of relationships shortly. We bring other people into our world. Those things can cause unwarranted strain on our emotions, unwarranted strain on our physical health, and unwarranted strain on our relationships, right? There can also be these conflicting demands between work, home, school balance, right? I'm trying to balance my needs, maybe my biological children's needs, my spouse's needs, my job needs, based in contrast with the responsibilities of this other person that's in my life. And sometimes that may bring on a feeling of feeling like maybe things are out of control, right? I don't necessarily have what I need to take care of this person. And that can become a snowball effect if we don't get people involved to be able to help us, or in particular, if we don't have our own plan for taking care of our own health while we're caring for other people, which I'm going to talk about in a second. It also may bring on feelings of resentment that come from, just having your privacy taken away. My mom was in my house for, I think probably for a year, and it was interesting because I'm married and I have 3 boys, but I'm used to walking, through my house freely, with whatever I want to have on. And, so my mom moved in for that year. That all changed, right? I had to make sure that I had all my clothes on. I had to make sure that certain doors in the house were closed. Obviously, my wife had to make sure that our time of intimacy was timed when my mother wasn't around. So I did feel like there was an invasion of some of my privacy, caring for my mother, right? And then just having that limited time for yourself, because we all need time to ourselves. We can become disposable if we don't take care of ourselves. There's a reason that when you get on an airplane, that one of the things that the stewardess tells you, she says, and I know if this plane happens to go down, and the likelihood of it going down is minuscule, it's probably not going to happen. But if it does, these oxygen masks are going to fall from the ceiling. When they fall from the ceiling, you are going to be inclined to put your oxygen mask on your children, on your spouse, maybe the person sitting in the row next to you before you put yours on. But please, please put your oxygen mask on first. Why? Because if you can't breathe, then you can't help other people to breathe. And so our natural tendency sometimes is to reach out and help, and we haven't helped ourselves. But that's important for us to do. All right. So there are all types of emotional, physical, social implications of bringing other people into our lives. It really can shift our lives and bringing us into a place where we have to really, really make some huge adjustments. I learned that in foster care. It doesn't seem like bringing one person into your life is that big of a deal, but it is. It is. It can shift family dynamics. It can shift, like I said, your ability to have your own privacy. It shifts your schedule. It shifts your ability to be able to move and go as you please, to be spontaneous. It changes all of that when we have to care for others. It also can cause role confusion, right? You having your mother's been caring for you, and your father's been caring for you all of your life, and then all of a sudden they become disabled, or they become incapacitated, and now your responsibility is to take care of them. And all your life you've known your father as a caretaker or a provider, and now all of a sudden you're changing your father's diapers, right? You're having to feed your mother her own food when she used to cook meals for you most of your life. It can cause some role confusion and some feelings of sadness and grief and depression being in that type of situation. And imagine the emotional roller coaster that the person that you're caring for is going through, not being able to do some of the simple tasks and activities that they've been doing without thinking most of their lives. It can also cause unreasonable demands by other people in our sphere of influence, from relatives and siblings. There's a young lady that I was working with not too long ago, and their mother became incapacitated. It was her, two sisters and two brothers, and the mom didn't really have a strong relationship with the kids growing up. So all of the kids wanted to put her in a nursing home, and there was this one daughter, she wanted to take care of her mother, and so she took on this responsibility of bringing her into her home. Luckily, this lady was single; she wasn't married. But she worked a lot. So there was a conflict in her work schedule, and they already were bumping heads in their relationship. So managing her day to day was tough. She didn't want her touching her, and this mom didn't want her telling her what to do. It was real conflictual. And coupled with that, on top of that, piling on top of all of these expectations and responsibilities, is now these siblings coming into the picture, trying to tell this daughter how they should care for her mother. Like, they don't want the responsibility, but they're telling her what she should do, right? And mom should be doing this, and mom shouldn't be in the house this long, and mom should be at physical rehab at this time, right? And it almost brought her to the brink of depression. And then you saw this anger and resentment towards her siblings that wasn't there before. So sometimes those unreasonable demands from other people, and sometimes the person that you're taking care of, can happen as well, right? Unrealistic expectations. And I think one in particular that we can kind of take on personally is feeling like it's our responsibility to make people better, right? To improve their life, improve their health, and improve their circumstances. And that's natural, because we're taking care of that person, right? We're responsible for daily needs. We're responsible for their social life, their finances. So there is this feeling of if they're with me, they should get better. If they're with me, they should improve, right? If I'm doing a good job, right, eventually they won't be in this type of situation. And sometimes that is unrealistic, because sometimes the disability is a lifelong disability. So it's not about improving, right? But a lot of times it's about maintenance. And I believe in miracles, and people can, miraculously change their disabled state. I've seen that before. But most of these situations are maintenance types of situations where we're just supporting that person. Like I said before, helping them to manage from day to day. But sometimes that burden can be upon your shoulders, right? Like if they've been with me for 2 years and they're still not able to get to the restroom and use the restroom on their own. And we've been working on this for a year, right? So don't put that undue pressure and burden on yourself to feel like you have to make the person that you're caring for better, that because they're under your watch, that a miracle has to happen, right? That they must improve because you're taking care of them. Your responsibility is to be a support, right? And so nobody wants you to be God. And so family members and other professionals and people who not in your situation will oftentimes make you feel like you have to be God, and you don't. Some warning signs that we can be given over to burnout. What's burning out? It just means that I'm out of energy, right? I don't have the capacity anymore to support from a healthy place. I don't have the ability anymore to support from a healthy place. And so when I get to that place, my body begins to respond. My body begins to send me warning signals that I'm not emotionally okay. Just like if you were driving your car and the check engine light came on, and I don't know if y'all like me, sometimes I just drive past the check engine light, I get to it later. Then all of a sudden you hear a loud clicking noise, or your car suddenly stops, right? Or other lights began to come on because we didn't stop to check and see what was going on with that first check engine light. And right, so burnout is the same way. It's like the check engine light to your emotions. It's a sign for us that something is emotionally not right. And so we need to pause for some reflection and start assessing our own health. So some of those warning signs: depression, number one. That's the number one warning sign, is depression. The simplest way I could describe depression without trying to be real clinical, just like when it's a gray cloud over your head, right? And this gray cloud keeps you from feeling energy. It disrupts your sleep. Your eating patterns change. All of a sudden, you can't focus and concentrate. Your thoughts are all over the place. You find yourself crying and you don't know why you're crying. You're restless, right? All of those types of things could be depression. Anger, irritability, anger and frustration with the person that you're caring for. That resentment, like I talked about earlier, can set in, and you can, be upset with the person that you're helping because they're taking so much away from you emotionally. Denial about the person's condition could be a warning sign of caregiver burnout. Exhaustion, you're just tired, right? It's a lot to just drag yourself out of the bed in the morning, and you're always needing to get to a place of rest or escape. You find yourself not having the energy, focus, or concentration to take care of daily tasks. You can start developing health problems of your own: ulcers, right? Headaches, stomach aches. All of those types of things can be signs that I'm heading towards burnout. Difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping. Some people can't get to sleep, and some people oversleep. Also, social withdrawal. I just don't feel like being around people. You used to be a social butterfly. You were the life of the party. You know, you went out and hung out at at places that you consider recreational. You went out with friends and family and other relatives, right? You went to uh functions at your job or business, and you find yourself not really wanting to be around people anymore because you're always trying to find a place to recharge your battery. These all can be warning signs of caregiver burnout. So as I'm going through this presentation, I want to just pose a few questions to you, not necessarily for you to have to answer now, just to think about. What are some of the early warning signs that you may have? Early warning signs that you're heading towards stress, that you're heading towards burnout. Some of you may already be there, right? You're driving your vehicle down the interstate on E, on empty. You're on fumes. Think about some of those warning signs. Maybe some of the ones that I mentioned before, maybe some that I didn't that you can think of. Think about what happens to your body. Our body responds to stress, like the car responds to the check engine light and begins to sputter and make noise and clang and bang, right? Our body does the same thing. What are some of the thoughts, the ideas, the interpretations, expectations, and judgments that may run through your mind about the situation that you're in, or maybe the person that you're caring for? What are some of those thoughts about maybe relatives or extended friends who may have thoughts or ideas about what you're doing as a caretaker? Is there positive messages being given to you by people on the outside, or people being negative towards you? Is the person that you're caring for positive and thankful that you're caring for them? Or are they pessimistic? Do they make your job difficult and tough? And then what emotions are present as I'm reflecting? Because this is what we know about every human being, every human being. All thoughts lead to feelings. All feelings lead to behavior. All thoughts lead to feelings. All feelings lead to behavior. And why do I bring that up? Because if I'm depressed, if I'm angry, right, or if I'm happy, that emotion came from a thought. All emotions come from a thought. And I will behave the way that I feel. If I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm angry, it's going to be hard to respond in a way that's joyful, pleasant, and energetic. Those two things don't go together. So if I can trace my emotions, I can trace my thoughts. If I can learn to address my thoughts and my emotions, I can learn to address my behaviors. All human minds work that way. But my emotions are an indication of how I'm feeling. And so I don't want to ignore those. So sometimes people may just tell you, oh, just suck it up. Oh, it's not that big of a deal, right? Or you should be able to handle it. Or you doing too much. Or you crying too much. Oh, it's not that hard. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Or all of the things that people may tell you that may be erroneous. Your emotions may be in direct opposition to what they're saying. Don't ignore your emotions. Like, we don't have to act on our emotions, but they are indications that something may be wrong, especially if you're experiencing them on a daily basis. So the next topic I wanted to talk about really quickly is codependency. Codependency. Some of you may have heard of this word before. Some of you, this may be a brand new term. I have a lot to say here, but just a few things that I want to share. And I want to do I guess a general overview of what codependency may look like. And this is, I bring this up more as as food for thought, something to be aware of, and something to look out for. There's a lot of the families that I work with, in particular, people who are caregiving, or I see it a lot also in marital relationships, and yeah, primarily those two relationships. We can get into a situation where our caregiving has become unhealthy for both people. And so when we get into a relationship with another human being, no matter what the relationship is, right? And it's become unhealthy for both people. We tend to think of that as what we call codependency. So I'll talk about that in a second. So working with codependent people, you hear some thoughts and some statements, and some of the statements that you may hear are something like, like this. I've learned how to be a martyr. Anybody ever heard that before? I learned how to be a martyr, right? I become the sacrificial lamb for this person or for this situation. So it's my duty, my responsibility to die on the sword. And if I die on the sword, then my life is worth living. I had to die so that this other person could move on. Or I learned how to reject myself, as though that was some badge of honor, right? Or others may go on the other end of that spectrum and say things like, I gave to others, then got angry because I felt used. And maybe some of you have been in those type of situations before, where you're caregiving, but the caregiving now feels as though you're getting the short end of the stick, and it's becoming abusive, and you feel used in a bad way, right? Or this statement: sometimes I still let other people control me. And there are situations where people get into relationships, and even though the caregiver is caring for the person who's disabled, and that disabled person needs them, the person who's disabled is controlling the person who's helping. I see that a lot in parenting, caregiving relationships, or in relationships where the person who is being cared for is financially driving the relationship. In other words, that person has the money, right? So they've learned to control the life of that person that's caring for them. So all of those situations can be dangerous situations. So exactly what is codependency? What's codependency? So a quick definition, there's a lot of definitions. I want to use quick definition, one that you can remember. Codependency is a person who has let someone else's behavior affect him or her and is obsessed with controlling other people's behavior. A person who has let someone else's behavior affect them, right, to the point to where I am no longer emotionally healthy. Or the opposite end of that spectrum is where a person is now controlling me, right? They now have dictated and have the steering wheel to my life. It can easily happen, and then people can be in those types of situations and not know it. I've been in a situation with a couple before, and I asked one person a question, and the person that I asked looked to the other person and made sure that it was okay before they gave me an answer. Two consenting adults, but that person did not even answer questions unless they got permission, visual permission from that other person before they answered. Two individuals take care of themselves. They take care of each other, right? Those situations exist. So two main ideas of codependency that I want to talk about, and then we'll move on. So one is underfunctioning. These are two big subtopics of codependency. Number one is overfunctioning. Number two is underfunctioning, right? In other words, you're centering your life around someone else's life and not taking care of your own life. It is admirable to take your life, use your life, and help somebody else improve their life. That is an admirable quality for caregiving. But if it takes you hurting yourself to take care of someone else, that's unhealthy. That's unhealthy. If you are a caregiver, you deserve first and foremost to be taken care of. You first. Oxygen mask on you first. You deserve that. Because if you are not well, nobody else is going to be well that you take care of. And so there are situations where we can get too involved in taking care of somebody else at our own detriment, right? That then causes us not to function to full capacity in our own lives, our own responsibilities, our own family, our own health. So overfunctioning and underfunctioning are two characteristics of codependency. So some keys that a person may be overfunctioning in somebody else's life. Now, I want you to look at these words, because these words at first glance, these words look um, like something that we all should be doing, right? They look like things that we all should be doing. These are great qualities and characteristics to have as a person. Giving, fixing, caretaking, helping, and serving. Great qualities, great characteristics that we use to take care of other people. But if we use these things to control and overfunction in another person's life, it becomes dangerous. And sometimes the people that we're caring for can overfunction in our life, or we can overfunction in the life of the person that we're taking care of. So how do I know when these admirable qualities become dangerous and lean towards codependency? When I'm having to think for other people when they can think for themselves. Speaking for other people when they can speak for themselves. Just taking over conversations. Y'all ever seen that before? You talking to somebody and somebody else jump in and say, oh yeah, and start answering for the person. That person never says anything else in that conversation. They were totally capable of answering for themselves, but that person jumped right in. Trying to control other people. Doing for that person what they can do for themselves. That's probably one of the hugest codependent qualities there is. Doing things for people that they can do for themselves. It is our responsibility to each other to empower each other. There was a lady who came and spoke at one of my venues one time, and she gave the definition for empowerment. I love it. I kept it with me for years. She said empowering is when you take a piece of your power and you give it to somebody else until they get their own. Take a piece of your power, you give it, you share it with somebody else until they're able to get their own. In other words, you help people along the way until they have the ability to help themselves. And so sometimes in codependency, we don't allow that process to happen. And then we become enablers, right? And so that's easy to do, especially if we're caring for somebody who's really near and dear to our heart. And if we're honest, some of us who are in the helping profession, we like to be needed. We like for people to count on us and depend on us. So if we're not careful, we can be enablers. All right, so cons of overfunctioning. They can limit the other person's growth, keep them from being capable and responsible. Though its intent may be to help, this type of over-involvement ultimately hurts the healthy development of the other person. At the end of the day, that's what's important, that we're all able to take care of ourselves to the best ability possible. Then there's underfunctioning. So we talked about overfunctioning, too much involvement, underfunctioning. So what does that mean? So underfunctioning can look several ways, right? This is when I'm not giving myself the best that I should have. Right? I'm not taking care of myself to the best of my ability. So this can be self-neglect, including neglect of your health, money, work, and relationships. And relationships and money are two of the things that I see go first. Two areas that I see that go first. Failing to consider yourself in decisions and planning. Your needs come last, not even second, but last. Development of physical and psychological problems. We talked about anxiety and depression. Then development of ethical and legal problems, lying, misrepresentation, bankruptcy, all those types of things can happen as a consequence of us not being able to take care of our own business because we're taking care of somebody else's business, and we prioritize that over our own health to our own detriment. Underfunctioning limits our growth, keeps us from being capable and responsible, right? And ultimately, this hurts the healthy development of me because I have to help me take care of me. I'm ultimately responsible for me. Codependency can cause us to lose ourselves in someone else. There has to be a boundary between us and the person that we're taking care of. There has to be always that boundary. And when there's not, that boundary doesn't exist, it could be unhealthy to both people in the relationship. So there's a way that I want you to think about yourself and the person that you're caring for. Y'all are two separate individuals, and so this two-person relationship can look three ways. So one, it can look enmeshed, right? That's the top portion of the diagram. So this is when my life is totally blended into another person's life and we can't function without each other. Like this person tell me that if I'm not around, they're gonna kill themselves. If I don't, if I leave the house for a certain amount of time, they're gonna go into a depression, right? Nobody else can help take care of them but you. And so you don't have a distinction between your life and their life. That's enmeshed. It's unhealthy. Or you can have an alienated relationship. And what happens in an alienated relationship is maybe bitter and anger and resentment is built up. So now y'all on opposite sides of the fence. So now we have a relationship and maybe I'm taking care of you, but I resent you. Right? I can also almost become emotionally abusive towards you because of the resentment. Right? My obligation is no longer coupled with compassion and empathy. I'm doing it because I have to do it. But we're really enemies under the same roof, or enemies in the same relationship. The ultimate, the desirable stance that we want to take in relationships is what we call a healthy relationship. When I have my individual self, I take care of myself, my needs. You have your individual self, you're able to help yourself to the best ability possible. And there is some overlap where I care for you. But I don't lose myself in you. You don't lose yourself in me. All right. So he having to mesh, alienated, but we want to be in healthy relationships. All right. So as we're caring for people, I just want to share this last portion of the presentation, some things that you can do that I think that would help you care for yourself. So number one is what we call mindfulness. Mindfulness is just all about being in the moment. You ever been through the routine and rut of your days? It seems like a week has gone by and you don't know where the time went. All of a sudden you look back, 3 months have gone by, feel like you hadn't really accomplished anything. You hadn't gotten anything done. You don't know where the time has went. And so a key component of that is when we're not grounded and centered in our day and what's going on in the moment. So mindfulness teaches us to be present for ourselves, with ourselves. So we pay attention to what's happening in the moment, including moments of stress and chaos, right, with the person that we're caring for. And we ask ourselves, is something here happening that shouldn't be happening? And if it is, I want to acknowledge it, own it. I want to move on till tomorrow without addressing it. I want to name it to tame it. If there's anger, if there's resentment, if there's bitterness, if there's depression going on, I want to name it. I want to address it. I might have to bring in somebody else to help me deal with that. But I don't want to move forward another day without addressing these warning signs and symbols. Right. And so sometimes that may require that I have to take a step back from the person that I'm caring for. Right. I might have to create some emotional and sometimes physical space to make sure I can assess and evaluate my own needs. I might have to bring somebody in to help me, because sometimes people would just try to take care of themselves while working with that same person, and that same person represents resentment and anger every time that you see them, so you're not able to really get what you need. So sometimes bringing somebody else in for a moment so that you can step back and get better may be necessary and helpful. All right, that's just a slide with some statistics. I'm going to move on with that for the sake of time. So some other things that are helpful is finding out the activities in your life that are nourishing and depleting. I want to do as much nourishing activities as possible for my own health. So you really can literally take out a sheet of paper and write on a day-to-day basis, what are the things that I do that build me, that grow me, that develop me, that help me, make me feel better? What are the things that I'm doing on a daily basis that take away from my energy, that take away from my time, that take away from my resources? See if you can notice any trends, right? And the object of that is to make sure that I have at least an equal amount of nourishing things as I have depleting things. Ideally, it would be more nourishing activities, right? I'm gonna talk about those in a second, but I need as many nourishing activities as I can in my life. This keeps me from long-term burnout. And so one of the critical ways that we can take this plan of nourishing and depleting is creating a self-care plan. If you hear nothing I say after this presentation, I want everybody to hear this. Please, everybody on here, please, you need to have a self-care plan. If you take care of another human being, please, please have a self-care plan. Take care of yourself. And self-care plans are more than just getting your nails done and getting a massage, right? It's taking care of me so I can be the best me. It's taking care of me so I can be the best me. So really quickly, 6 types of self-care plans that you can focus on. So number 1 is my emotional self-care. These are activities that connect, process, and reflect on my emotions, right? Sometimes that may mean I might have to see a counselor, writing in my journal, that can be therapeutic. Some of you have activities that you like to do, like art, playing music. All of those things are helpful. Maybe that's talking to your pastor or a friend, but you have to take care of your emotions. Remember, your emotions are the check engine light to your life. They let you know when things are good and when things are bad. Some practical self-care. Practical self-care. So these are tasks you complete that fulfill the core aspects of your life in order to prevent future stressful situations, like budgeting, taking professional developmental classes, organizing your closets. Those are things that I put into place. These are systems and structures that I put in place in my life to make my life easier, right? So they're not another added task or burden to my day. So practical self-care. Number 3, physical self-care. In a few minutes, I'm gonna talk about the importance of that. But you know our physical health is super important, right? Because if your body isn't well, you can forget being able to even take care of yourself and other people. So physical exercise is important. Taking walks during lunch, sleeping 8 hours a day, staying hydrated. Those things are important. If you're not hydrated, I want to tell you this fact: if you're not hydrated and you're thirsty all the time, um, the research shows that we've already lost 10% of our ability to think when we're dehydrated. And some of the responses for being dehydrated, not having enough water, is depression, anger, and mood swings. Depression, anger, and mood swings. Not being hydrated can cause really serious emotional consequences, and we just had never been taught that before. But hydration is important. We should be hydrated at least every 2 hours. Number 4, taking care of my mental health care. Something that stimulates your mind and your intellect. Reading books, puzzles, chess, going to a museum, anything that keeps our minds going. Your mind is a use it or lose it organ. It is what we call elastic. It can grow and it can shrink based on how much we use it. So we want to take care of our mind as much as possible. Mental self-care. And then number 5, social self-care. We have really been created to be social creatures, right? So having nurturing and healthy relationships with people in our life are important. Bare minimum, we want to have at least emotional social relationships, people that we can count on, right, to help us through our emotions and being that person for somebody else. We need that. There are so many people who go into depression and sometimes in serious situations in the suicidal bouts and thoughts, because if they just would have had somebody to talk to, right, to bounce that idea off, somebody to put what they were thinking into perspective, they feel better, but they don't talk to anybody. They don't talk to anybody. So our social relationships are important. So taking time to go out with lunch with friends, making time to call relatives, those that you love, those that you have fun with, is important. And then number 6, spiritual self-care, right? These are activities that nurture your spirit, allow you to think bigger than yourself. Doesn't necessarily have to be religious, but for most of you, there probably is. So there's things like meditation, yoga, going to a place of worship, dedicate time for self-reflection. I personally love meditation. I'm a pastor, so I love all those things connected to my faith. But it's important to know that there's something out there, somebody out there bigger than myself that I can draw spiritual strength from. And last but not least, I want to share, oh, I hate that the whole thing didn't show up, but I developed an acronym called SEEDS. And this is a quick self-care plan that anybody can use in your life, whether you're a caregiver or just want a self-care plan yourself. So it's SEEDS, SEEDS. And so the S stands for spirituality. I just addressed that. It's probably the most important component of your life, but having some semblance of meditation, prayer, fellowship with other people who share your faith, right? And acknowledging existence, there's something outside of you, greater than you, right? That's important. The second E stands for exercise. We need to exercise more than just looking good. When we exercise, there's all types of chemicals that's released in our body. One is, and more importantly, is called dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical that helps us to feel good and it helps us to be happy. That's why people who are prescribed antidepressant medications, those medications help stimulate dopamine to make you feel better. Exercise naturally releases dopamine. That's why you've never seen a depressed gym rat. You've never seen anybody who works out, fanatically and is depressed. It's too much dopamine being released. So sometimes it's just getting our body going on a daily basis, whether that's a walk, whether that's changing a light bulb, whether that's getting on the treadmill, it can be beneficial to our health, our mental health. The second E is efforts. And that's just having a daily routine and a schedule. That speaks to giving our mind something to do, right? When we can have our days planned and scheduled as much as possible, whether that's to a planner. I personally use my phone. I schedule every hour of my day. It just gives my mind a systematic way of knowing what's coming, what's next. So I'm not drifting from hour to hour and assignment to assignment, right? I'm not letting things catch me off guard. Those things are planned. That's important. But it can also keep your mind emotionally healthy because your mind knows what's coming next. And so that decreases, in particular, anxiety. Anxiety is just, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And then having a good diet. I'm not a medical doctor, but we all know the importance of having a great diet, eating the foods that are important to make sure that our bodies are functioning at maximum capacity. Everybody on here can go to glycemicindex.com. It talks about the foods that are healthy and that aren't healthy to our diet. We know foods that's high in sugar and starches and things like that they're gonna keep us groggy and slow our bodies down and not let us be the best version of us as far as our ability to be able to sleep, to have energy, and to socialize. People with poor diets usually have poor long-term relationships because their body is normally chemically thrown off, right? So they're not able to give the best mentally to those relationships. And then the last letter is S for sleep. So our bodies, just depending on who you are, requires different hours of sleep. It's different for everybody, but the goal is that you have a regular sleep pattern. So some people that may be 6 hours, some of you that may be 8. For me, it's 5. At 5, I'm good. Your body will normally tell you that. But whatever it is, trying to keep that pattern as much as possible daily in my routine, because built into your sleep pattern is something called a circadian rhythm, and it controls your emotions and your energy, right? So if that circadian rhythm is thrown off, it's not the same if you're sleeping 3 hours one day and 8 hours the next day and 2 hours. That cycle is thrown off. It'll make you emotionally groggy, right? You won't be the best version of yourself. So spirituality, exercise, efforts, diet, and sleep, you can just take those letters right there and create a self-care plan today for yourself. However you create it, the important thing is that you have one for yourself. All right, that's the end of my presentation, and I'll take any questions and answers if there's some. Thank y'all so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. I am checking the chat to see if I have any questions in there. So if you have any questions for Dr. Butler, please put them in the chat right now. And Dr. Butler, if there is a way that they can reach you, do you want to give out your contact information?
Sure, I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but I do see a comment that says, great presentation. As always, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sabrina. I appreciate it. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate it.
And I'm going to go ahead and put our survey to the, our link to the survey in the chat. So if you need a certificate of attendance, please fill out the survey. And at the bottom of the survey where it says additional comments, please put your name and your email address so that I will know where to send the certificate to. Also, if you would like a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, also fill out the survey as well, and you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. And this webinar was recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later on today. Monique, you would need to fill out the survey and put your name and email address on the survey. I have posted the link in the chat, and it's also going to pop up at the end of this webinar. All right, Dr. Butler, I don't see any questions. I just see compliments for you. And as always, you have been a great presenter and we really appreciate it. And thank you again, everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
You
too. Bye-bye.